You had just landed your biggest job yet, a leading role in a show airing on a big TV network. It was huge for your acting career, and you were still just a kid. But what was even cooler was that all your favorite shows growing up had been made there, and now you got to star in one. You remember the first day of filming as clear as day. You were so excited, only to have it ruined forever. When the computers on set were turned on, and for a second you saw something on the screens that was permanently burned into your mind. Images that you couldn't properly comprehend at the time, but inherently knew were disgusting and wrong. And now, after watching the new documentary exposing the studio for what it really was, you feel like it would be wrong not to speak up and tell your story. There have long been whispers of what did and didn't happen all those years ago at the Nickelodeon lot. But while conspiracy theories, blind items, and deep dives through old content typically pointed the finger at one key member of production,
we've talked a ton about Dan Schneider on my channel.
And a few brave souls came forward over the years.
For me, being on Zoe 101, it was like, okay, if I say how I feel, then I might not be able to come back here, which is something that I love.
To make their voices heard.
Even if it was informed by self-righteousness, I think I did something that was really hard to do. Oh my God, it makes me emotional. I'm proud of myself.
Like many incidents in Hollywood, it seemed what occurred at Nickelodeon would remain one big open secret. Until recently. See, the new explosive 5-part docuseries, Quiet on Set, has made what allegedly happened behind the scenes at the network public knowledge. And as these dark details come to light, one fact has become clear. Nickelodeon's secrets went way deeper than anyone knew. Quiet on Set has multiple targets, the first of whom should be a familiar name to anyone versed in Nickelodeon lore, Dan Schneider. As Nickelodeon's first Lifetime Achievement Award recipient and the network's golden boy, it was clear even from his early days at the network that Dan Schneider had a magic touch. But just as easily as the show creator could make someone a star, he could also break them. Or at least, this was the case for Katrina Johnson, who once upon a time was poised to be the network's first big female actress, with plans for the Katrina Johnson Show in motion, until weight gain, followed by puberty, dethroned her as Dan's favorite, and along came the younger version of her to take her place, Amanda Bynes. Yes, Dan and Amanda had grown incredibly close as he took her career from child star with All That to teen idol with The Amanda Show and What I Like About You. And the bond the two shared, well, it came with some physical affection. According to the editor for The Amanda Show, Karen Finley Thompson, Dan and Amanda's relationship was physically close, and she'd often see Amanda hugging Dan or giving him a neck massage on set. The show creator was also someone Amanda could turn to in her time of need, like when her parents allegedly disapproved of the older guy she started dating at 16. During this tumultuous period with her parents, Amanda allegedly asked for Dan's help running away and later sought his counsel on gaining emancipation from her parents, a move that ultimately failed in court and led to Dan being cut out of her career by her parents. But naturally, not every actor on Dan's sets received the Amanda treatment. In fact, African American actors on All That and The Amanda Show, like Giovanni Samuels, Brian Hearn, and Raquel Lee Ballou, often felt more like tokens than valued cast members. And the roles they played, well, they often drew on stereotypes. And while Dan may have jokingly referred to All That as highbrow stuff, what it really was for the actors involved was frightening, as sketches like Coffee and Sugar and On-Air Dares pushed them to their limits. The issues on Dan's sets also spilled over into the writer's room on his show. Quiet on Set specifically focused on the two female writers on The Amanda Show, who were forced to share a salary between them.
I thought to myself, don't be a complainer, do whatever you have to do to get this job.
Eventually, however, the environment, where Dan openly talked about how women couldn't be funny, shared adult videos on his screen, and even asked one of the female writers to pantomime an explicit act while telling a story about high school in the writer's room, led to a lawsuit from writer Jenny Kilgan, against Nickelodeon for gender discrimination and a hostile working environment. Yet, despite settling for an undisclosed amount, Jenny felt the lawsuit was all for nothing because Dan's behavior didn't stop. If anything, it became worse. But after years of allegedly terrorizing cast and crew, to the point the show creator was reportedly banned from interacting with the cast on the set of Sam and Cat, complaints led to Dan being ousted from the network in 2018. And while the investigation never found any inappropriate behavior on the show creator's behalf, that didn't mean there weren't other deviants lurking at the Nickelodeon sets. Jason Handy was a production assistant at the network that appeared at the end of various episodes of All That, and by all accounts was a nice guy. Actress Giovanni Samuels even had him write a message in her notebook, which read, "You and all the kids are the reason why I work for free half the week." Sweet, right? Well, maybe at the time. In hindsight, however, these words were chilling. See, Jason's interest in children, specifically little girls, was not admirable, and a woman named MJ learned this the hard way after she allowed her daughter Brandy, an extra on The Amanda Show, to exchange emails with the PA, only for the child to receive a lewd image of Jason.
And he said he had sent it to her because he wanted her to see that he was thinking of her.
MJ didn't inform the police, out of fear they'd think she was a bad mother. However, in April 2003, after receiving a tip, law enforcement searched Jason's home, where they found over 10,000 images of children and 7 video files of minors, many of which would be considered CP. But that wasn't all law enforcement discovered at the home.
The officer said we found Ziploc bags, each one with a girl's name on it.
Each of these names belonged to a different girl. The one labeled with Brandy's contained her letters. Due to evidence like this, including journals Jason kept where he went into disturbing detail about his attraction to young girls, and testimony from Brandy and another child, Jason was sentenced to 6 years. But at Nickelodeon, people like Jason were in good company. Ezell Channel, a man that any background check would reveal was a previously convicted sex offender, worked at the network's lot and was arrested in December 2005 after he essayed a boy at his place of work. And then there was Brian Peck. Of no relation to Josh Peck, Brian was All That's Pickle Boy, a part that, in itself, was an innuendo waiting to happen. But again, cast members like Brian, in fact, they even felt comfortable going to his house for a barbecue, which was a kid's paradise from one room entirely dedicated to vintage toys and comic books, to a Planet of the Apes themed garage. However, in this garage, there was one item that stood out to then 14-year-old child actor Kyle Sullivan, a painting of a clown holding balloons. He asked Brian about the painting, and Brian flipped the painting around to reveal who it was from. To Brian, I hope you enjoy the painting. Best wishes, your friend, John Wayne Gacy. The backside of the piece read,
I didn't know the details, but I knew this guy's a serial killer who killed a lot of young men and boys.
And this adult who proudly showed off the painting, along with letters and photos he kept in his nightstand from his treasured pen pal, John Wayne Gacy, was that same man that in August 2003 was arrested on 11 charges of child SA. Turns out, gut feelings are sometimes right. Brian was not good news. There was a victim, and they were anonymous. Until a jaw-dropping moment for viewers at home. Quiet on Set revealed the identity of this John Doe to be one of Nickelodeon's biggest stars, Drake Bell. Brian, who also worked on sets as a dialogue coach, met Drake on The Amanda Show, where he befriended the young teen. Drake's dad, Joe Bell, however, kept a watchful eye on this budding friendship between the adult and his son, and it wasn't long before the father began to notice Brian's overly touchy behavior towards Drake.
It'd maybe walk over to Drake and be feeding him some lines or whatever and put his arm around his waist, put his hand up on his shoulder and kind of run it down his arm and things like that.
From Joe's perspective, Brian's treatment of Drake was eerily similar to a clip of the dialogue coach and a young Leonardo DiCaprio on the set of Growing Pains, where Leo had played a homeless teen.
Brian is the famous artist, and we always make fun of each other and portray each other in silly, satirical ways.
Leo's job on this set, for some reason, is to make fun of me all day long. Leo, as you know, is the latest, hottest, hunkiest teen idol there is.
Yeah, his muscles.
Look, speaking of hunky, huh?
However, when Drake's father went to production with his concerns, he was told that Brian is gay, and that perhaps this wasn't an issue of inappropriate behavior, but homophobia. After this, Joe was ostracized on set, and soon enough, by his own son. Still, Drake's father gave his ex-wife one piece of advice when it came to his son's acting career that he would no longer be involved in. Do not, under any circumstances, leave Drake alone with Brian Peck. But it was too late for that. Drake's mother trusted Brian, and for that matter, so did Drake. Brian did what could be deemed as grooming, isolating, and building trust with his target to eventually carry out the mistreatment. Brian began this process by telling Drake and his mother that his father was stealing Drake's money. He wasn't, which built trust with Brian while simultaneously isolating him from his father. Brian continued to build trust and isolation by driving Drake to auditions and letting him crash at his house alone, making it seem like a safe space to rest. That's until one morning, when Drake was sleeping on the couch at Brian's house, he woke up to the grown man essaying him. Drake was only 15 at the time. From that moment on, Drake felt trapped and like there was no way out. And while Brian apologized and said it would never happen again, the abuse not only continued, it became worse. So, Drake carried this dark secret until someone caught on. See, one day, when Drake was blowing off plans with Brian to spend the day at his first girlfriend's house, and Brian began repeatedly calling not only Drake's cell phone, but the home phone, the girlfriend's mother pulled Drake aside and told him that a 40-something-year-old man had no business calling her daughter's boyfriend. But while she signed Drake up for therapy and told his mom her concerns, it wasn't until 2003, around the time Brian was trying to get Drake to convince Dan to let him play his father on Drake and Josh, that Drake broke down. The truth came pouring out of the teen during a call with his mother, when Drake screamed into the phone what Brian had been doing to him. His mother immediately called law enforcement, and after the police taped a phone call where Drake had Brian admit what he'd done, the dialogue coach was arrested. When Drake called his father to tell him the news, his dad responded that he was so glad that Brian was not able to get his hands on Drake. The teen couldn't bear to tell his dad the truth. In October 2004, Drake attended Brian's sentencing. Drake, his mother, and his brother sat on one side of the courtroom, and on Brian's side, there was everyone else.
His entire side of the courtroom was full.
Yes, across the aisle were various industry colleagues and familiar faces, and their support wasn't just present in the courtroom that day. It was written. Quiet on Set's petition to unseal letters of support revealed that not only had the Amanda Show staff written in, but so had several notable stars that had the chance of working with Brian. We'll get deeper into this later. Drake's mother's statement addressed Brian. Drake, however, addressed everyone else in the courtroom as he looked at each of them and said,
"You will forever have the memory of sitting in this courtroom and defending this person. And I will forever have the memory of the person you're defending violating me."
Brian pleaded no contest and was sentenced to 16 months for 2 charges of child SA. He was also ordered to register as a sex offender. This was not, however, the end of his career, as he went on to work at The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody after his conviction. The 5th and final episode of Quiet on Set wrapped things up with 2 more shocking allegations. One came from All That's Giovanni Samuels, who claimed that a week before the series premiered, Dan called her for a quote of support. Of course, the actor didn't give him one, and when Dan asked her whether she had a good time on set working with him, she told her former boss the truth, that she had been terrified of him. The second reveal came from All That's Shane Lyons, who, looking back at his experience on set, believed he could have been Drake. According to the former castmate, Brian made passes at him backstage that he was too young to understand at the time, including asking him adult questions when he was 13, something he could see in hindsight was entirely inappropriate. And so, as the revelations from the docuseries made their way to social media, naturally, the internet was full of reactions and debate. While there was no measuring the evils committed by men at Nickelodeon,
this man right here did some really sick things.
Some users were surprised to learn that after years of believing Dan Schneider was the biggest monster at the network, the actions of one man gave the show creator a considerable run for his money. Yes, everything about Brian Peck creeped viewers out, from his fascination with John Wayne Gacy that some viewers theorized may have verged on worship.
John Wayne Gacy is an SA offender who unalived a whole bunch of young men. And the fact that Brian Peck had a shrine of John Wayne Gacy in his room is honestly terrifying. It could have been so much worse than what actually happened, and that was bad enough.
To what he did to Drake Bell. See, despite Drake brushing over the details of what occurred to him by saying in his interview, "Why don't you think of the worst stuff that someone could do to somebody as an SA, and that'll answer your question." Those who read the court documents that flashed across the screen in the second episode caught a glimpse into the horrors the grown man subjected the teenager to. The charges against Brian included various sorts of SA, the use of a foreign object, the use of anesthesia or controlled substances, and employing a minor for adult content. And that made Brian's sentencing all the harder for viewers to stomach.
Just 16 months? Oh my God! That should be life! Them in the head.
However, while Drake received an outpouring of empathy,
he looked so pained in his face.
Not every participant in the documentary received the same. Some users were confused that Brandy's mother, MJ, was telling her daughter's story for her, and the way the mother spoke about Brandy in past tense had some fearing the daughter might have passed away. Or perhaps she just didn't have a good relationship with her mother. After all, as some pointed out, this was a woman who seemed to be living out her own dreams through her daughter.
The minute she got on that camera, the first thing she said is, "I always wanted to be an actor." Boom. That's why she did that interview without her daughter's input, is because she always wanted to be an actor, and she finally got the opportunity to have her big break. So she sat in front of that camera and she performed like she always wanted to. Give her a round of applause.
And then there were those who found themselves on the receiving end of the internet's wrath simply by being mentioned in the series. You know, those who belong to the long list of actors and industry professionals who wrote letters of support for Brian Peck. The docuseries provided snippets of what they wrote, but the full letters were quickly made public by Business Insider and TMZ. And well, the letters get worse the deeper you read them. Several of these letters seem to explain the reason for the essay to take place, with many seeming to shift the blame on Drake. Growing Pains actress Joanna Kearns wrote, "I can only believe that there must have been some extreme situation or temptation exerted upon him to influence his actions." Boy Meets World actor Will Friedle wrote, "Brian must have felt an overwhelming sense of pressure and temporary loss of reason." Ron Melendez, from Big Slap, a film Brian produced, wrote, "Brian made a large mistake, but it was not his alone." X-Men producer and a close friend of Brian, Thomas DeSanto, wrote, "Drake was dealing with a lot of personal issues, and Brian was someone he could talk to." James Marsden, known for his role in The Notebook, acted with Brian in X-Men, and chose Brian as the best man for his wedding, wrote, "I am speaking wholeheartedly about a man whose heart is pure, and no matter what you're talking about, his intentions are always good. I don't know what it would take to have something like this occur, but whatever it is extremely out of character for Brian." Even adding that what Brian had been through in the last year is the suffering of 100 men, seeming to allude to the aftermath of Drake taking legal action against him. Perhaps the worst letter with clear blame towards Drake came from Twin Peaks actress Kimmy Robertson, as she wrote, "I noticed this young man kept asking me about Brian, and generally being sleuth-like. I also noticed no gay male, for example, makeup, hair, or PA, won't be alone in a room with him. I believe with all my heart that Brian was pressured and pushed beyond belief before he caved in with Drake, an outrageous, overtly gay, oversexed person with no idea what he is doing to Brian, Brian's family, and friends. And that's not all. Many of the supporters were confident that Brian would never harm again. The Amanda Show director, Rich Correll, wrote, "I'm aware of the charges being brought against Brian. He deserves a second chance. He has taken full responsibility for his mistake and will be forever regretful of it." The Amanda Show actor, Taran Killam, wrote, "I know for a fact that he regrets any mistakes made, and that this is certainly not something that would ever happen again." Growing Pains actor Alan Thicke wrote, "I also know beyond a doubt how remorseful he is, and how dedicated and focused he will be on his rehabilitation." Boy Meets World actor Ryder Strong wrote, "I am convinced that if granted probation, Brian would not disappoint the court." And there was even someone who wrote a letter despite not having enough information about the situation. The Amanda Show stage manager, Beth Carroll, said she was surprised to learn of the accusations, since Drake seemed his usual excited self on set. She explained she never saw Brian engage in anything illegal and ended her letter with, "This man is not a predator." Viewers were disturbed to find people they admired had written letters about Brian's supposedly good character, despite being told what he was accused of. These letters also came as a shock to Drake, who, before the documentary, had no clue they existed.
People who I trusted, I looked up to, were in positions of power over me, directors, producers, writers, actors, some that I thought were friends, some that I went on to work with later. Reading the letters was, just completely re-traumatizing. Seeing the names and what they wrote was just unbelievable.
Some of those who wrote letters provided apologies and excuses after words were exposed by the docuseries. Joanna Kearns told the creator of Quiet on Set that her choice to write to the judge was based on misinformation. In a public statement, the Corrells expressed deep regret over their defense of Brian, claiming that if they had known the truth all the time the letters were written, they never would have written them. And Ryder Strong and Will Friedle even preemptively admitted their wrongs in a February episode of their podcast, Pod Meets World, where they claimed Brian convinced them he was the victim of jailbait and downplayed what had really happened. But despite these public statements, according to Drake, only Ryder had reached out to him personally. And as for their excuses, Drake wasn't buying them.
In a sense, they kind of mirror what was written in the letters, except saying things like, "Oh, had we known the details," or "we weren't aware of all of the facts." And I'm like, what? Did you need to know if it was day or night? Did you need to know what color the couch was? What details would have changed your thought process at that time to write a letter in support of somebody who had admitted to what he did?
However, Quiet on Set wasn't perfect in terms of viewer reception. One user critiqued that the series was terribly executed and, journalistically speaking, felt lazy by going after lesser fish. Writing, "What truly grinds my gears is the fact the individuals very high up, higher than almighty Dan Schneider, were not named, shamed, nothing. They were complicit. They padded their pockets and were completely ignored. In the sense I feel he actually got scapegoated. Being successful and making your network a lot of money does not mean these individuals had to look the other way or sweep the pedal matters under the rug. They just chose to." Other users agreed that the allegations against Dan seemed to be a mixture of reaching and sour grapes from former child actors whose careers didn't turn out, it seems. They argued that while aging out of a role or doing Fear Factor-inspired stunts might have not been fun, it wasn't exactly as insidious as they made it seem, and in comparison to the other material in the docuseries, seemed needlessly light. For those kids who were really traumatized, I feel sorry for them, and I wish we focused more on them here. Instead, I feel like we got a lot of interviews with former kid stars who are trying to cash in on the controversy and get their face back on the TV screen. I'm not trying to be mean either. I watched a lot of Nickelodeon as a kid, and I don't recognize half the people that are talking in this documentary. However, not everyone agreed. As one user put it, "I don't think that other stuff was just sour grapes. It was meant to illustrate the environment of those sets and how the kids felt they couldn't complain. I don't think there was anything insidious about the fear factor stuff either, but it is an indictment that all the kids seemed to hate it, but felt like they had no choice. And another user wrote, "It's mentality like yours that stops people from coming forward because they get stupidity like they're just trying to get their faces back on TV." But then there was what the series left out. See, Quiet on Set forced viewers to confront beloved characters from their childhood with a new lens, such as All That's Captain Big Nose, whose costume could be suggestive, or Penelope Tanked, whose very surname was one letter change away from meaning something entirely different. Specific scenes were also put under the microscope during the docuseries, like in Zoe 101's backpack episode, when the character Nicole accidentally sprays a goo pop in Zoe's face, something actress Alexa Nicholas heard crew off camera refer to as a Yes, according to Quiet on Set's findings, Dan Schneider's productions were rife with adult jokes and innuendos that often went over both audiences and actors' heads. Dan, on the other hand, seemed to know exactly what he was doing.
Today my special guest is the executive producer of the Amanda Show, Dan Schneider.
Hi.
And wasn't opposed to letting the audience know that he was the one pulling the strings.
Now, you're the executive producer of the show?
Yeah, I am the executive producer and I'm the head writer.
You actually wrote the words you're saying to them right now?
Yes, I actually wrote this whole conversation that we're having right now.
As for what couldn't be shown on TV, well, that was posted to the internet as online extras featuring Kat Valentine, played by Ariana Grande, in scenarios that seemed less like sitcom jokes.
Sometimes I wonder if you can get juice from a potato. Come on, give up the juice.
And more like specialized content.
Is it possible for a teenage girl to drink water upside down? I'm thirsty.
But while the docuseries exposed several questionable scenes and backstage moments, with content from the network spanning decades, it was the internet's job to dig up the rest. And boy, did users deliver, from further scenes of bathing suit-clad Amanda in a jacuzzi with grown men.
Now, Elvis, I understand that you're the king of rock and roll.
That's right, baby.
How about a plate of spaghetti?
Give me.
You're a professional wrestler.
That's right, baby.
To more online extras.
Oh man, my uvula got stuck between that hamster's toes. I'm soaking wet! Quick, somebody bring me the ocean!
Nickelodeon was littered with adult undertones in children's content. However, a number of scenes currently circulating online come from one Dan Schneider creation in particular.
You can argue that Victorious probably had the most amount of, wow, that's a kid's show and that's in there?
For example, one scene from Victorious not only featured Nickelodeon's favorite feature.
If you watch Dan Schneider's work, it is completely impossible to escape the notion of feet.
Why does your brother have a bag of fake feet in the trunk of his car? Not gonna lie, my brother's pretty weird.
But a threatening clown.
Right to your house.
And the taglines that play at the end of each episode, followed by the Sony Music logo, weren't any less alarming.
I heard you swallow.
Here comes that feeling.
That is a quality foot.
That is so not tight.
Sometimes I do it to myself.
What about your spicy tuna balls? Is this gonna hurt?
Probably. Ooh, it's all tingly.
Beg me.
It's average.
My bucks have spoken.
I gotta find my mother.
What are you into?
How bad do you want this?
Enjoy the bone.
I don't want to see that thing again. Put it away.
Wiener?
I'm scratching it. Yes.
You do it way more gentle than my mom does
You
it.
smell so fruity.
In behind the scenes from various Nickelodeon productions, actors appeared visibly uncomfortable around the network's one and only cash cow, Dan Schneider, as he posed inappropriate questions.
Okay, the question is, if you wanted me to hit you with a bottle of something, what would it be? Pineapple juice? Okay, here comes. One of my Twitter followers, his name is Chris, he wants to know if all the iCarly cast members were starving on an island, which one would get eaten first?
Which one would get eaten first?
Yes.
and crossed the line of not only with what was appropriate to say as a boss, but what was appropriate to say as an adult talking to children and teens.
Who do you have here?
There's the maid. She plays my girlfriend on the show.
Oh, it's too bad I didn't cast a pretty girl to play your girlfriend. Oh no. That's a little joke because you're ridiculously beautiful.
Actors, however, found their ways to cope. Victoria's star, Elizabeth Gillies, for one, seemed to find the best approach to be simply ignoring the show creator.
And then we have someone giving me the cold shoulder, as always, ignoring me. Oh, it's Liz Gillies. Hey, Liz, how are you?
I'm okay.
What? Gillies, what's with the boots? Gillies? Liz?
And while young actors might have lived in fear of Dan, with a mere announcement from the notoriously hard-to-work-with showrunner sending them trembling.
At the end of the day, I love it when the cast gets sassy with me because I get to write all the scripts with some very talented writers, but I can put them in any horrible predicament I choose.
When it came to picking on someone his own age, it seemed Dan had met his match in the actor behind Carly Sherry's big brother on iCarly.
Jerry, I'm going to push me one on this one and say this. Do you have a hold on? Here is Jerry Trainer. Hey.
Yes, as one of the few adult actors on set at Nickelodeon, Jerry Trainer seemed to have no trouble calling Dan out.
Hi, cuteness. Hi, cuteness. Hey, you weirdo. You are. You're cute.
Questioning the creator's labor practices.
This is what happens when it gets late.
Yeah, seriously. Let us go home, Dan.
Or fulfilling his brotherly duties by seemingly blocking co-star Miranda from Dan's potentially unwanted hug. But with this much questionable content from a children's network, was it possible there were voices missing from Quiet on Set? While only briefly mentioned in the series, iCarly actress Jeanette McCurdy's 2022 memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, which we covered in depth in a previous video, had some jaw-dropping claims of its own. In the book, the former actress talked about someone she simply referred to as the creator, a man she worked for at Nickelodeon that many believe to be Dan Schneider.
Hey, Dan Schneider. I know you're watching my Vine. Do you like my Vine? Fine. Look what you've done to me.
In one chapter, Jeanette recalled the creator making her wear bikinis, even though she felt more comfortable in a one-piece, an allegation that mirrors Alexa Nicholas' experience on Zoe 101. Where she not only had to wear extremely short skirts, but Dan was there to watch her model them.
Whenever I had wardrobe fittings, he always had to be in them. He would sit in the chair and I would come out and I would do a spin and then he would look at the wardrobe artist and say, "Can I have the Polaroids?"
And on another occasion, Jeanette claimed the creator even put his hand on her knee, both situations that perhaps shed light on why she never came back for the iCarly reboot. Jeanette's last project with Dan was Sam and Cat, which ended in the network offering her $300,000 as a parting gift if she promised to never talk about her experience at Nickelodeon. Clearly, she didn't take the money. But after watching Quiet on Set, viewers had to wonder, had anyone else? And if so, what secrets were still being kept under wraps? According to what the creator told Jeanette, the cast of Victorious was often inebriated, a claim that, if true, could lead to an unsafe working environment for children. Then there was Elizabeth Gillies' questionable marriage to Michael Cochran, a composer 21 years her senior that she met on set and started dating at 19.
Seeing what they allowed in Victorious, it makes Elizabeth's relationship with her husband who worked on the set even more alarming. She claimed she was always infatuated with him, but that nothing happened until she turned 18. Now, after watching the documentary last night, is that true? I don't know.
There was also the one woman the internet was convinced had enough information to put Dan Schneider behind bars, Amanda Bynes. The docuseries briefly touched on her fall from grace and subsequent end to her acting career, but never offered an explanation. Then again, was anyone owed that?
I don't think Amanda Bynes ever has to speak on this. It breaks my heart, but I understand why. She may not want the male gaze. And there was a point in Amanda Bynes' life where she could have been Meryl, and men like Dan Schneider robbed her of that.
But internet users weren't just speculating about the past, they were digging. And this effort has already yielded some tentative results. For example, Drake's ex-girlfriend, whose mom was the first person who asked Drake about his relationship with Brian, well, she appeared to be a public figure as well.
I just found out who his girlfriend was, and it's gonna blow your mind. It is none other than Canadian singer-songwriter Fifi Dobson.
Yes, according to some sources online, the two dated between 2002 and 2005.
But it doesn't stop there. A few years later, Fifi Dobson was about to release an album and then it got shelved. And then a few years after it got shelved, it got full release.
And one of the songs on this album, titled Man Meets Boy, had lyrics that seemed to reflect what Drake went through, with the first verse including the lines, "Man meets boy, shattered summer broken dreams. Too young to know, what he wants is so extreme. He held you down, told you not to scream or cry." The internet had also dug up old videos of Brian Peck on children's shows.
There's so many strange innuendos. He's looking down. Did you see that? And then he looks at a child, and then he looks down, and then it's Pickles.
And in every appearance Brian had, something seedy seemed to follow.
Alrighty, the time has finally come. Let's get these balls a bouncing.
Every single thing with Brian Peck, it doesn't matter what you're choosing, right? There is some innuendo with Brian Peck.
He even appeared in one scene as a clown, an unsettling part for the man with ongoing correspondence with John Wayne Gacy.
Hey kids, it's me, Mr. Happy Pants. Did somebody order a clown? Hello, I'm waiting. Hello, I know you're in there.
According to the docuseries, after being convicted, Brian Peck was hired on the Disney Channel's Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. What wasn't mentioned was the role he played in 3 episodes, The Mirror.
I'm here to take you on a little trip. Come on. Step into me.
Okay, I think you've been going a little heavy on the glass cleaner.
After being fired from Disney, he continued to find work as a dialogue coach on Jack and the Beanstalk. He then worked on season 2 of his friend Charlie Sheen's Anger Management in 2013. His last featured role was in a 2018 miniseries titled Animal Showdown. Yet, the docuseries hasn't just inspired viewers to dig through old Nickelodeon footage, but former child stars to come forward with their own stories. And as a result, confession after confession began flooding social media timelines. TikTok user Wogao claimed she was replaced on the Nickelodeon show Bucket and Skinner's Epic Adventures after speaking out about creepy shit on set. And then they proceeded to make my life a living hell. So I fled LA, went to law school, became an attorney, and the rest is history, she captioned in a post. Ali D'Ameco, who played Rosalina in the Naked Brothers band, opened up about an episode where she cheated on Nat by kissing a French guy, a part that was played by a grown man while she was still a teenage girl.
I'm 4'11". He's a 30-year-old man. I'm sorry, I couldn't even watch it. It gave me the ick. It honestly gives me PTSD.
In the comment section, she elaborated on the weirdness of the situation, writing, "Dude, he wasn't even an actor. He was a backup guitarist for live shows and practiced with us in band practice and always wanted to be written in. It was his 4'9" dream to be an actor." On Instagram, Matthew Underwood, who played Logan on Zoe 101, revealed he'd been essayed by his best friend's stepfather at 12 and again by his agent at 19, the latter leading him to leave LA and stop acting permanently. Why am I telling you this? Well, lately, many people have been blowing up my email telling me they hope me and my mom pass. I'm being called a pedo defender and all that jazz, the former child star wrote. So I'm sharing this with hope that some of you can recognize that just because a person doesn't shout from the rooftops that pedos are bad or that people can suck, that does not mean they don't have their own reasons for staying silent. Good reasons. Personal reasons. Matthew added he had nothing bad to say about Dan Schneider. Brian Peck, however, had more allegations lodged against him. Nickelodeon's Salute Your Shorts actor, Michael Bauer, explained when he auditioned for the movie The Willies in the 90s, Brian Peck wanted the then-child actor to appear in a specific way in a nightmare scene where maggots and mealworms would be poured on him.
I was asked a series of questions about me being naked in the movie.
He was later told he could stay in his pajamas, so Michael took the role. When it came to the actual filming day,
they gave me some pajamas and they were transparent, very thin and white.
Michael refused to wear them, and because extra time was taken to purchase the new pajamas, it seemed Brian used this opportunity to get closer to Michael.
He was like, hey, can I walk with you in the bathroom and talk to you about the scene? And I was like, no, it's okay. Let me just go put on the pajamas and all that. I'll talk to you when I get out. He's like, well, we don't have a lot of time. Just while you're getting dressed, let me go in the bathroom with you.
During the actual filming of the maggot scene, Michael said he was laughed at and heard the adults joking about the maggots entering private areas, telling him to close up that area. After the scene, Michael shared a disturbing experience with Brian.
Brian tells me, hey man, let me help you undress you. I can look for maggots or mealworms if they crawled into your outfit, because they're hard to see and you're wearing like blue and white. And let me go in the bathroom with you while you undress and I can check for maggots, from your backside or whatever.
Michael also revealed other questionable situations. He said when his father was concerned about not being able to accompany Michael to set, Brian made an offer.
The offer was to be picked up and stay with Brian Peck in a hotel for the 10 days or 12 days or however long it was.
When his family did show up to set with Michael, Brian also had other ideas.
So we get down there, and then Brian Peck was upset when he saw my family. He's like, oh, I thought you were going to hang out with me. After we get finished filming, we would be able to read the script together, and we would be able to, develop the character, because he was also a dialogue coach.
Michael also had a concerning experience with someone else, an unnamed Nickelodeon executive, during his time working on Salute Your Shorts as a 15 and 16-year-old, which, looking at the info presented, looks an awful lot like grooming. While Michael doesn't remember anything criminal happening, he did recall moments that could have turned dangerous. Michael said he became best friends with another boy on set, who he does not name, and this executive decided to bond with them, taking them to Universal Studios, movie theaters, lunches, dinners, and even gave Michael merchandise from Nickelodeon and MTV. After building trust with the boys in public settings, the executive invited them to a private setting, his hotel room.
To watch movies, eat popcorn, he was gonna buy a popcorn machine and have an ice cream maker.
Michael remembers the executive asking them to stay the night, which they refused. They made it out safe and got scolded by their parents. After that, the boy stopped talking to the executive and he flew back to his main workplace after 4 days. He said this executive may have had a hand in bringing Dan Schneider into Nickelodeon. However, even those who didn't have a bad experience at the network were forced to look at things differently after the docuseries. In an Instagram story, Victoria star Robbie Shapiro wrote, "If I hadn't worked for Nickelodeon and didn't know any of the people involved, would I be okay with the behavior and the treatment of others I'm seeing? No, I wouldn't be okay with it, and I'm not okay with it." Nancy Sullivan, who played Drake's mother on Drake and Josh, posted a throwback photo of Drake to Instagram, writing that while he and Josh weren't her real kids, she always loved them. "I was both devastated and proud seeing the man he's grown into sit down on camera and bravely tell his truth," she wrote. Some former actors were even inspired by the docuseries to reveal further behind-the-scenes secrets from the network. On Instagram, Jack Salvatore, who played Mark Del Figolo on Zoe 101, launched some damaging allegations regarding the toxic work environment at Nickelodeon that he became privy to when he worked as a production department intern on iCarly and writer on Sam and Cat and Victorious.
We could talk about the massages. We could talk about the fact that he would literally count his gold coin collection in front of his crew who was living paycheck to paycheck. We could talk about how sometimes he would bring out his shotgun to scare one of the writers when they were working at his house. We could talk about the high-level conversations I wasn't supposed to hear about how Nickelodeon didn't want to recommend antidepressants for Jeanette McCurdy after her mom died for fear that she might herself and make the network look bad. But what I do want to talk about is never letting this stuff happen again.
And on TikTok, the Haunted Hathaways actress, Amber Frank, revealed a horrifying behind-the-scenes moment from her set.
Nickelodeon sent computers over to production when we were starting filming the show, and when they were turned on, there was child on them, and nobody was held accountable. There was no investigation, never even found out where it came from or who was responsible for it.
Yes, Quiet on Set had started an online movement of sorts, with various former child actors coming out of the woodwork with words of support and disturbing experiences of their own. However, even those who haven't released public statements have found ways to make their stances known, like Jerry Traynor and Nathan Kress from iCarly, who unfollowed both their show and Nickelodeon on social media. And perhaps some Nickelodeon stars could have benefited from the same silent support. See, Devin Werkheiser, Lindsay Shaw, and Daniel Curtis Lee from Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide went live on TikTok and seemingly made light of the docuseries.
Get back in your hole, Daniel, and give me your. Sorry, we shouldn't joke about this. We really shouldn't.
This is awful. Why are we doing this?
Because this is about us. Listen, our set was not like that. And no, it's f***ing awful. The Drake Bell is that's crazy to hear. That is, man. And that never came out, which is really wild. Really wild.
Until he was talking about it.
And safe to say, the jokes did not land with viewers.
Like, how desperate are you to stay so relevant that you choose to make somebody's abuse a funny topic?
The cast later apologized on their podcast, where they explained they made jokes before watching the series.
I get it. Now having seen the documentary, it's so disturbing.
And we had no clue of the magnitude of what they were discussing.
If I had just watched especially that third episode and then watched us joking like that, I would be like, are they sociopaths? Is something wrong with them?
And that brings us to the messy aftermath of Quiet on Set. As actors continued speaking out, Boogie, who played Tebow on iCarly, decided to reach out to someone for their perspective on the documentary, Dan Schneider. In the under 20-minute interview posted to Dan's own YouTube channel, the creator initially appeared to take responsibility for his behavior.
Watching over the past 2 nights was very difficult. Me facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and that I regret, and I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology.
And while he began his apology, attempting to not defend his actions,
no writer should ever feel uncomfortable in any writer's room, ever, period, the end, no excuses.
The interview was full of justifications, from the culture at the network.
Most TV writers, comedy writers have been in writers' rooms, and they are aware that a lot of times there are inappropriate jokes made and inappropriate topics come up. But the fact that I participated in that, especially when I was leading the room, it embarrasses me. I shouldn't have done it.
To the demand he was facing,
I would let the pressure of doing 40 or even more episodes per year, I would let that pressure get to me, which a good boss should never, ever do.
And what Dan couldn't excuse, he downplayed.
Was there specific things that you were doing?
Sure. I would snap at people sometimes. I would be snarky when I could have given them a nicer answer.
Or blamed on the warped minds of the audience.
Every one of those jokes was written for a kid audience because kids thought they were funny and only funny, okay? Now we have some adults looking back at them 20 years later through their lens, and they're looking at them and they're saying, I don't think that's appropriate for a kid's show. And if anybody had said anything, hey, we don't like that, that's not appropriate, then it would have been cut out.
In the interview, Dan also shed light on some of the murkier details from the documentary, including his supposed ban from set.
I don't know if it was an assumption. I don't know if somebody thought they were making me look bad by saying I got banned from the set. I have no idea.
Okay.
All I know is I was never banned from the set.
And the night Amanda ran away from her parents.
One night, it was very late, well after midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning, phone rang, I answered, it was Amanda. She was upset, she was in distress, she had had some conflict with her parents, I think her father, and she called me.
According to Dan, he then called someone that lived close to Amanda to pick her up.
Then I knew she was safe, I felt better, she ended up being taken to the police.
The most emotional moment of the interview came when Dan talked about Drake, as the creator was one of the only people the actor had confided in after Brian was arrested. As Drake said in the documentary, Dan offered his support to him, and according to Dan, he even went a step further by helping Drake's mom write her statement for the judge.
And I said, of course, and I did. And he ended up going to prison and serving his time. And yeah, that was probably the darkest part of my career.
But despite this one good deed, the interview was hardly a piece of unbiased journalism.
Well, regardless of what some people may think, I think it's only positive that you are there for people when they need you.
And viewers, along with former actors, were decidedly not #Team Dan.
Predator is not just SA.
Predatory behavior shows up in many different ways. It's preying on people's weaknesses and exploiting that. That's a predator.
TikTok showed me a video and it was like, oh, do you want to see an interview with how this man who terrified children and adult women and said women weren't funny and women should share a salary and terrorized everybody? Do you want to hear what he thinks? Do you? No!
Until Homeboy goes on 60 Minutes to answer some questions from some real journalists and not a cast member of his who he's paying to be there. Apology not accepted.
But Dan isn't the only one that's faced backlash. Alexa Nicholas, who appeared in Quiet on Set and has been vocally against the network for years.
I want to let everybody know that some of their presumptions about Nickelodeon in general were true. You know, there are predators at Nickelodeon. There are just predatory behavior in general.
Has been called out for allegedly profiting off of others' trauma by releasing a shirt with Nickelodeon plastered across the chest. A strange move to some, considering she critiqued the hosts of Boy Meets Pod for playing an advertisement at the beginning of their podcast about Brian Peck.
I don't know if you addressing that with ad revenue is the best thing. If anything, it also feels like you're making money off of the trauma. I have to say it.
Drake's former Drake and Josh co-star, Josh Peck, also came under fire after reposting an old video about severing ties with certain people from his past that some believed was aimed at Drake.
If I haven't talked to you since 2023, take that as a sign that you don't exist to me anymore. You got sprayed with the raid. Bye.
The clip called some internet users to delve into the actor's past, an investigation that's exposed a pattern of shady behavior. In a resurfaced episode of Josh's Good Guys podcast, the former child star revealed he had a falling out with Jeanette McCurdy.
I read Jeanette McCurdy's book. I thought it was an amazing book.
So did we, despite what Jeanette says.
According to Josh and his podcast co-host, they had previously been on good terms with Jeanette. In fact, she was even their first podcast guest on the day her book was released, before she told them to scrap the episode. They agreed to not post the interview. Then, months later, Josh hit Jeanette with a hi.
I got a green bubble. Am I blocked?
Oh, wow.
I think I might be blocked.
And this had led some viewers to the conclusion that Josh's personal experience with Dan Schneider,
being 100% honest, he just was a tough boss.
Yeah.
And I was a kid.
Which is crazy.
Was invalidating what Jeanette and others allegedly experienced. And this wasn't Josh's only public falling out. The actor previously had a feud with his on-screen brother, Drake, after the co-star called Drake out for not inviting him to his wedding.
I was bummed. I was like, man, that sucks. Like, I wish I could have been there for you.
And since Josh was allegedly blocking users in his comment section that mentioned the docuseries,
literally all I did was comment on his newest video today about it being crazy. I seen that video while I was watching Quiet on Set. It got like over 5,000 likes in an hour, and then I got blocked.
It was assumed the two were still not on good terms. However, Drake had defended Josh against the current backlash.
You know, processing this and going through this is a really emotional time, and a lot of it's very, very difficult. So not everything is put out to the public, but I just want you guys to know that he has reached out to me, and it's been very sensitive, but he has reached out to talk with me and help me work through this, and has been really, really great. So I just wanted to let you guys know that and to take it a little easy on him.
And a few days after watching Quiet on Set and taking his time to process what he learned, Josh offered an official statement on Instagram that read, "I reached out to Drake privately, but wanted to give my support for the survivors who were brave enough to share their stories of emotional and physical abuse on Nickelodeon sets with the world. Children should be protected. Reliving this publicly is incredibly difficult, but I hope it can bring healing for the victims and their families, as well as necessary change to our industry. And with that, it seemed many people were satisfied with Josh.
In my personal opinion, this was done well. He reached out to him. He apologized to him for all of the horrible things that he had gone through, took some time to digest it, and then came out with a formal letter that everybody can read.
But there were more things that the public wants addressed. We'll get into that very soon. First, the big question we're all wondering is, how could a network fail so many? And more importantly, what can be done so this never happens again? Luckily, the stars who were interviewed for the series had some suggestions. For starters, whistleblowers are essential. After all, without them, excuses and ignored red flags will allow predatory behavior to fester.
I didn't take it to the police because I thought they'd think I was a bad mom. It turns out he was pen pals with John Wayne Gacy, but we just laughed it off at the time. Drake's father begged them not to leave him alone with Brian Peck, but they just called him homophobic and let it happen anyway.
Then again, change can't happen just on an individual level. Measures have been taken by the network to ensure actors feel safe on set, which could involve enlisting the services of professional counselors or therapists.
It's about allowing the children to express how they're feeling so they can work through those feelings and make a informed, consensual decision.
The law also has to be revised, since as it currently stands, so long as guardians are on set, background checks aren't required. Changing this law would help keep convicted child predators off of sets for good and prevent things like Brian Peck's post-conviction stint on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody from ever happening again. If and only if these measures are taken seriously, children's networks might have a chance at becoming places of work that protect the young people they employ, rather than put them at risk. If you're interested in seeing all the exclusive interviews about the alleged dark side of Nickelodeon, Quiet on Set is currently available to stream on Discovery Plus as well as other services. But it's not over yet. As weeks pass by, some questions remain unanswered. And more questions emerge. We'll be delving into the stories of several former child stars.
These videos make me so nervous.
No. What? In this town, everybody knows everybody.
You make people mad, word gets around.
And then no one will hire you.
To provide more insight on situations that were glossed over.
Don't look at me like that.
And so people are just completely discounting everything the victim says, and then they're taking everything that Drake's defense attorney says at face value.
Or simply not brought up.
I don't really care if anyone believes me, as this is my story and my life.
That would take too long to cover in this already lengthy video. For now, we've got a glimpse into Nickelodeon, the network that's forever tainted millions of childhoods.
There's a special place in hell for people who don't protect children and let them live their lives without being able to trust anyone, much less themselves.